I'm Symonds, and I'm a cannabis science educator and advocate. I've worked in the regulated market for over 5 years, and primarily in Oregon, but doing advocacy nationwide. And so what we want to talk about is how cannabis education helps attract customers, but even more importantly, loyal customers. Loyalty is priceless. It really is, and you have to earn it. And I think education is a very special opportunity to do well by doing good, if that makes sense. So what we see in the cannabis beverage industry right now is this great opportunity where a lot of people are attracted to the category. And we see a lot of inexperienced consumers and even a lot of brand new consumers who say, oh, I don't like to smoke, but I'm interested in drinking maybe this relaxing or fun beverage. And so along with that goes the necessary information they need to know. What do they need to know? How do we help them have the optimal experiences with products that will keep them coming back? And this is really important because we have a lot of novel technologies and products are stronger than before. And so, what is our responsibility to people as product makers and people in the industry? So really, I look at the cannabis education as kind of a carrot and a stick, both at once opportunity. Now the stick we'll talk about first, that's less fun. This is the negative experiences and even potential liability. Uninformed consumers can easily overconsume, and that leads to bad outcomes. That leads to not only personal experiences that can put people off an entire category even permanently and say, no, I don't want to, I tried one of those drinks, it wasn't good. But it can lead to bad publicity for the industry and for products. Some of you might have remembered back in 2014, Maureen Dowd, the New York Times journalist, had an edible in Colorado and freaked out and wrote all about it. And, that was really bad for us. And everyone was like, well, hey, lady, you did it wrong. You should have educated yourself. But we can also make more of an effort to meet people where they are and, again, have the best outcome for everyone. So we're not getting... So people aren't having these bad experiences, and that's not the story being told about what our products can offer. And even further in that stick category is that liability aspect. We live in America. Lawsuits are a fact of life and something that we definitely want to avoid. So along, with that goes potential product recalls or increased regulation, which is not something that any of us probably want to see in the industry. We already operate in the most heavily regulated industry. So the stick, those are some pretty compelling reasons to try and make sure that people know the basics when they're interacting with your product. But then we have the carrot, and this is the more exciting part. This is the fun part. And that is really about your brand's value proposition. And so the education that you're offering, if you're proactively offering people reliable, helpful information, you're empowering consumers to really choose their own adventure and to have a great experience and to feel better and to understand why. And so when people are using products correctly, they're having fun, it's enjoyable, and it's also therapeutic, even if that's just the level of relaxation. Relaxing is therapeutic. And those optimal customer experiences, they create this baseline of satisfaction. So that's good. We want that. But I think we can go even further with education to build your brand into something that's unique and that is giving more. So you're getting more engagement, you're getting more credibility, and you're really connecting with people in a way that's memorable to them, and it means a lot to people. I know for me, when I have an experience, whether that's, a doctor who helps you with medicine or just a person who offers you something that makes you feel better in any way, you're really grateful, right? And so the knowledge of how to use the products isn't separable. It really needs to go along with it. I think personally, this is even more effective when you go beyond just what your product does. A lot of education around cannabis products is about here's how to use our product, and here's why our product works, and here's why it's great. And that's all good, but you can go further. You can teach people about their endocannabinoid system, and you can teach them the entourage effect, and you can give them the basics of that can sort of open some doors to start their journey of empowering their health, really. To me, again, recreation is great, but to me, a lot of it comes back to therapeutic uses. Again, though, not separate. There's that gray area where they're really blended. So I think recognizing that is important, too, because that's part of our responsibility as anyone who wants to play in this arena. So really, education becomes an important part of your value proposition that can lead to not only customer loyalty, but also retailers. A lot of folks who work in the industry, bud tenders, and other retail and staff in the stores are passionate about cannabis, but they're oftentimes not offered a lot in terms of education. It's an area that's so important, but people don't want to devote the resources. And so if you choose to be a company that does that, again, people are grateful, even if they're already in the industry. So what kind of information should you be including? I call this the 4 S's. Science, size, safety, and sourcing, I think, are the basics. So science, like how cannabis products work in the body. So you're introducing people to the endocannabinoid system, the entourage effect, but also kind of the state of science. Like, okay, here's what we know so far, and here's all the things that we are not too sure about yet, and being transparent about that. Explaining compounds like cannabinoids and terpenes, what they are and how they affect us, and using peer-reviewed science, not just kind of the general internet information that's out there. Helping people understand that cannabis is a personalized experience. And with consumer products, a lot of times what we're trying to offer is something that's standardized, but part of the beauty of cannabis is that it interacts with us individually. And so helping people to understand that can help them make choices so that their experience is a good one, even if we can't fully standardize it for everyone. Then size, that's the way I just wanted to keep it in the 4 S's, but I'm talking about portions. Portions and pacing. As we all know, the portion size is key, and there are the legal limits, but for some people, a couple milligrams of THC is a lot, especially edibly. And so the importance of really teaching people to start low and go slow and find their experience that way versus overdoing it, which again can be traumatic for some people, and lingering. We know that cannabis isn't clearing out of our systems quickly, and you can't just undo it. So that means, again, touching back on the science, teaching people about how our livers, especially edibly, beverages we're consuming that way, our livers are metabolizing THC into a different version of the molecule that's more potent and more intoxicating. And so for people to understand that, even if they are used to smoking, something that's edible may hit them differently, and to use, caution, I guess, or to be prudent if they want to have their best time and best experience. So communicating activation times and the importance of being patient. A lot of people's horror stories start out with, well, I ate the brownie, but then I thought it didn't work, so I ate another one, and then, right? And so helping them to truly understand why that's important. And part of that is teaching people, well, how full should my stomach be? Right? Something like that. It's simple, but it's important. Ideally, not completely empty, not completely full, but have like a hearty snack or a small meal with some good fats in it, ideally for best absorption. And then safety. I think it's pretty important to be offering people information about potential side effects and avoiding drug interactions. We know that when we eat cannabinoids or drink them, they're getting processed by the liver, and cannabinoids can affect the way that the liver breaks down other compounds, including many pharmaceuticals. And so just helping, like the classic grapefruit warning, right, on many pharmaceuticals, don't take this with grapefruit. Well, CBD, for example, does the same thing as grapefruit, which is to affect the way that our CYP enzymes in the liver break down other drugs or don't. And so we just don't want to tinker with that. We don't want to mess with it at all. And so helping people understand to keep a buffer of time before and after, a couple hours before and after taking your medication to consume your cannabinoids is just a best practice that's pretty simple. Also, natural side effects. I mean, we know, okay, THC, there's the ones that may cause dizziness or dry mouth and those classic things. But CBD, for example, which is also in a lot of products, naturally lowers blood pressure and it decreases the need for insulin in the body. So if people are going to be using a product regularly and they're on medication for those things, they'll want to keep an eye on their numbers. And some people end up actually reducing their dose or even eliminating it. Of course, working with their healthcare providers and keeping an eye on those numbers. We think of beverages as being purely recreational, but again, there's this big crossover into therapeutic, especially when people find something that does work for them and makes them feel good. They will want to use it regularly, which is good for you. But just offering more information so they know, so they're empowered to take care of their health as best they can is, I think, a little basic that can go a long way for people. CBD also naturally lowers blood pressure, which I have naturally low blood pressure, so I can usually feel when the CBD kicks in. I feel this little pressure change in my head. It's not dangerous for people, but it's good to know if, just facts like that. So we can go further and distinguish ourselves from the crowd just by giving people a little more. And then source. So being transparent about our supply chain and our ingredients. So ideally that's going to be soil to sip, using more alliteration, it's very fun. But so that includes everything from cultivation methods to processing, manufacturing, and then ingredients, including additives. And sugar, like Warren mentioned. Caffeine is often added to beverages. Making sure that we're giving people the most information possible. I personally, having worked with farms, am very invested in the importance of talking about cultivation methods even. And the labeling requirements are different in each state, but where was this grown? How was it grown? And who grew it? And really giving a little window into all of that. And then in your manufacturing process, what extraction method did you use, and why did you choose it? And that also gives you a chance to talk about your product a little more and say, we chose this because it's the best, and then you get to make your argument why. And you can kind of go into your product formulation. What ingredients or technologies are you using that are specific to your product or special about it? But again, giving the bigger picture, I think, gives you a lot more credibility versus going to somebody who's brand new and just giving them a pitch that only shows them this little slice, like, here's what we do and it's the best. You don't need to look at anything else. Just look at this. Giving them the whole picture, I think, makes that argument even stronger, because you're like, oh, look at all these options here. And then out of all those, we selected these because they're the best, or because they will do this for you. So to kind of summarize everything, in my experience as a cannabis science educator, when we're immersed in the industry, we tend to think everyone knows this stuff, right? Everybody knows this information by now, at least the basics. But that is not true at all. There is a constant need, and people have questions that are very, very basic. What is THC? I still find myself explaining that to people, and that's okay. We need people to meet them where they're at. And so if you choose to be the brand that does that, you are winning their loyalty. You're really gaining their trust in a way that is, I think, irreplaceable. People are very hungry for trustworthy and transparent education, and ideally for free, so that it's accessible to everybody. And that's, again, touching back on bud tenders or retailers. A lot of those folks are sort of entry level, and when we see cannabis science education programs out there, they cost money, and they might cost a couple $100. And that's a lot to ask of somebody just to do their job that they may, be getting paid entry-level wages for. So if you choose to be the brand that connects with those folks, your sell-through is going to go up. You're not just selling to an intake manager. That's great. You can sell them an amount, an order. But for that to then sell through to the customers, people are asking the retail staff for recommendations. What do you like? Who is doing it right? What's the good stuff? And so making connections with those workers is equally important, if not even more so. And again, accessible. And then accessible in terms of the science as well, right? You need to use accessible language and ideas and concepts and be explaining things in a way that can be grasped by anybody or almost everybody, right? You want it to be accurate. You don't want to get the science wrong, but it's finding that nice balance of of understandability along with the accuracy. And we do live in an era of edutainment as well. So engaging people and making it fun, that creates a bond with your brand as well. Edutainment can still be legit information, and then that's another way to grab people's attention, which is harder to do these days than ever. So we might see education as this extra thing, but I think it's just crucial. I think it's not only the safe thing to do to protect your brand and your product, but it's also the savvy thing to do to set yourself apart. So with that said, I wanted to leave some time for questions. Does anybody have questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. Oh, sorry.
I'm trying to think of how to say it. What do you think is a good standardized way or a metric to try to get customers to start thinking about some of these things? So, like, I'm somebody who's trying to do that with what I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of all over the place. It's hard for them to know what they're looking for or what they're, how can we kind of distill it down to some things? I'm not working with beverages, so it's a little bit different. But still, I want that conversation to happen with people. I just don't know what words to choose in that dialogue.
Yeah, formulating your message. That is important because once you have it down, then you can, spread it to the world. But I think part of that is going to be to choose your medium. So what feels most natural to you? Do you like the written word? Do you want to create blogs? Or do you like videos? Or if you're interested in, like you said, a metric and collecting data, you could do something creative and fun, like you could create a quiz for people where they put in things.
So I have something
like
that, and it is a metric that I'm going to collect data with. So then I'm like looking at, let's say, like the Emerald Cup, for example. So do I want to kind of go, people should be looking at taste, aroma, effect, or does that really resonate with somebody who's new to trying cannabis in whatever form. Like, you know, when people are new to it, is it necessary to go to that place, and where I'm asking them to start looking at those things? Or are they just more interested in wanting to know how they feel, and are they at their best, and do they like how they feel, do they not like how they feel, and they just don't know how to approach it?
Yeah, well, yeah, because I personally think that aroma and all of those elements are very important when it comes to flower in particular. I think you could start with, I mean, if you have the ability technically to set it up with asking them even, you know, what is your goal? Are you more interested in the sensory experience, or are you just interested in effects, or both? And then it can be, you know, a decision tree from there. And again, trying to make it fun and engaging. If it's like one of those quizzes, like find out about yourself, you know, these fun things that people like to do. Of course, you know, the science will tell us more about terpenes as we go along, but we know some, and so I think there's something to work with there in terms of like mood and flavors and aromas. Going further, if you're looking to, you know, so that's for people who are new, you really want to keep it basic. You don't want to overwhelm them, but you also want to open the door for them to go further if they want to. Offer them some concepts that they can continue with. But for even industry folks, bud tenders and such, you know, certifications can be a nice way to offer them for free some education about. Yeah, I worked with a company in Washington called Halo that does extraction. They do vape products, but they're very, very high quality. And so we created a whole certification around not just their products, including their products and why they're so wonderful, but the science, right? And the response has been great, and it's actually a pretty rigorous class. And people appreciate that because they feel accomplished when they complete it and they get that certification. They're like, you know, they're proud. And that's a connection that they then have with that brand. It's a bond. And so, you know, they really chose by doing that to set themselves apart in that way. So some of it might be figuring out your approach and what works for you. But, you know, thinking about the medium and the technology that you want to use to connect with people, or technologies. I tend to go all the places. I'll go on podcasts, I'll do print media interviews, just to put information out there in every direction that people can find it, whatever they prefer. Yes?
So I'm just curious, if, let's say that I'm starting a cannabis drinks business, right? Mm-hmm. What would you say is the most impactful tier for this education, right? Should they be focusing on educating the bud tenders at the retail tier? Should it be educating direct to consumer on their website? If you had, you know, one move, what's the one move that you would suggest to educate consumers?
I think it depends on the scale and capitalization of your business. If you're a small business that you need revenue coming in, like crucially, I would work with the dispensary staff first, because that's kind of the bang for your buck, where the sell-through of your product is really, really key. But if you're on a bigger scale where you have a huge budget and you're national, you're building a national brand from the beginning, you have a little more buffer there to really try to be connecting directly with consumers. That's a bit tougher and it's more nebulous, but yeah, just depending on what you have to work with in terms of money. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you again for having me. Thank you so much for listening. I didn't put my email or anything, but if you want to find me, I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, so feel free to connect.